Hi guys, my name is Vanessa Smedley and I'm a painter. Well, if you've watched this channel for a while, you know that winter is not my favorite. So I'm super intensely excited to say that spring has sprung. So we're going to paint this nice lovely little set of tulips right here because they are a symbol of spring. So let's do this! And here are the materials for today. Go ahead and screenshot that, or they're listed in the description for you. I am going to start out by masking off all of these tulips with some Pebeo Drawing Gum. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want the background to be one continuous soft focus background. And if you don't do that, it might get patchy or you might not match the colors properly. So I like to mask it off so you can paint it all in one go. There are a lot of artists that will not use this much masking fluid, but I have never had a problem with it as long as I use 100% cotton paper like this arch is. But what I have had issues with is using masking tape and cutting around it, because I have literally cut the paper and then when I took the masking tape off, it ripped up a layer of the paper. I have also had issues using contact paper because the paint just bleeds right up underneath it. So I prefer to use masking fluid. I'm mixing up a nice strong black with ultramarine blue and burnt sienna right off the bat, just right out of the tube. Then I'm mixing sap green with some burnt umber, and then I add a little bit of cadmium yellow to one area of that. Now we are going to start on the background, and I'm going to wet the entire thing with a Hake brush so that I can begin dropping in the color. Then I start with the green, and then I'll begin to put all that black in there. I'm going to start out kind of lighter, and then I just go darker and darker with higher and higher concentrations of the paint. When it starts to get a little bit dry, then I give it a spray with my water bottle, and then continue dropping in darker and darker paint until I get it to where I want it to be. So in the background, this has some of those bokeh circles that everyone likes to try to replicate. So I'm going to show you a little bit of a trick to how to do that. I've got this little tiny little bottle right here, and I'm going to put a shop towel over the top of that and kind of keep it tight around it. I'm going to turn that over and then use that to kind of stamp down into the paint, and it's going to remove some of the little circles. And it's going to be kind of diffused, kind of like the bokeh circles are. You can also use a coin for this or any other kind of circular device. Then I'm adding in some even darker paint, lifting out a few areas, and then I'm going to let this dry completely. Now that it's dry, I don't think it's quite dark enough, so I'm re-wetting the entire thing and I'm going to darken it up. Basically going to do the exact same thing I did last time, and just make sure it's dark enough in the areas that I want it to be darker. It's time for a fun fact about tulips. Now, most people immediately think of the Netherlands when they think of tulips as to being where they're from, but they were actually originally found in mountains of Central Asia, and they were very first recorded to be cultivated by the Turkish people over 3,000 years ago. They weren't actually introduced to Western Europe until the 16th century. And then I let all of that dry, and then I'm going to come in with a kneaded rubber eraser and remove all of that masking fluid. Then I'm mixing two different greens. I start out with sap green, add cadmium yellow, and then some cobalt blue. And then we need a much bluer green here, and so I'm starting with sap green, adding a whole lot of cobalt and a little bit of cadmium red to gray it down. Then I'm going to begin using these greens on the leaves here. So what I'm going to do is paint an area, skip the leaf in between, go to the next leaf, and then wait until it dries before I come back in and do the ones that are directly adjacent to it. Just because you don't want them to leak into each other. The leaves to the left have more of that kind of light teal, like succulent green type of color. And then the ones to the right, you can see more sunlight through them, so they have more of a yellow effect here in the middle. So I'm going with that green that I've mixed the most yellow in as the base for those leaves. and that will help once we try to get that sunlight effect in here. Okay, now that these other leaves have dried, I'm coming back and doing every opposite one. Another fun fact about tulips is that they hold many different symbolic meanings according to the culture that you're in. For instance, in Western societies, they represent love and romance. In Persian and Turkish traditions, they alert the arrival of spring and symbolize renewal and rebirth after winter. In Dutch cultures, they symbolize wealth and abundance. Now that these leaves have dried in the front here, I'm coming back with my darker green, and we're going to paint around the areas that have the light showing through, leave them nice and bright, and we're just going to paint in all these cast shadows as well. Then we're going to darken up certain areas of the leaves to show the topography of them. In order to do that, I am basically just adding paint on top of the dry paint, and I'm using a damp brush to smooth out the edges. Next, I'm going to begin mixing the colors of the tulips themselves. So I'm going to begin with Quinacridone Magenta, add some Carbazole Violet to it. Then we're going to use some Quinacridone Rose by itself. And then Quinacridone Magenta with Carbazole Violet, and then adding in some Cobalt to make it even cooler. What I'm doing on the petals is wetting them first so that they blend nicely, and then I'm starting with the Quinacridone Rose and then adding the other blends, the other mixes, in order to add in all of that color and all that shadow. At the bottom, I'm adding in a mixture of Cadmium Yellow and Carbazole Violet, just enough to gray it out. And I'm trying to remember to paint around the white areas of each petal. I am still skipping every other petal so that they have a chance to dry in between so that they don't all run in together. In another interesting fact about tulips, the word tulip actually has its origin in the Turkish word for turban, and that just refers to the shape of the flower, looking like a turban. For this petal right here, there are a lot of cast shadows on it where you can see other petals shining through it. But for now, I am just going to give this just a once over of the color. We'll come back and do all of that later. This tulip right here is going to show the majority of those lighting effects that we really want to achieve. So make sure you leave all of that white there, because if you don't, it will not look like all of that light is shining down on these things. When I was painting the background, I made sure to concentrate all of the darkest darks around this flower as well, because the contrast is going to amplify that lighting effect as well. So here I'm using one of those circle making templates that architects use, and I am just using a shop towel, wetting the area and using a shop towel to lift out some more areas, and that's only if you want to define the circles a little bit better than the way that they were defined before. Now that all of that has dried, we're going to come back in with some nice, really dark, saturated, concentrated color here and add the little striations on each petal and the darkest parts of all of it and the cast shadows, all of that kind of stuff. And it is going to add all of those lighting effects that we're looking for. While that's drying, I'm going to add in some more detail on the leaves, and I've got a really nice dark concentration of these colors, and I'm just adding in some shadows and some separations. One more fun fact. In the 16th and 17th centuries, tulips became so valuable in the Netherlands that there was a period called tulip mania, where one single tulip bulb could be worth as much as an entire house. Now that all of this is dry, I'm coming in here and adding in the overlapping petal shadows so that you can see the light coming through here. So I'm just using the purple and I'm just painting that right over the top. Next, we need some shadows on the white spaces, so I am using some very watery Cobalt Blue and I'm just adding in the shadows on the white. I ended up losing some of my white, so I'm using a Posca pen. Now that all this stuff is dried, I'm using a Posca pen to bring back in some of the white. And this Posca pen is kind of at the end of its days. It's not got very much paint left in it and it's very, very dry. So this area at the bottom of the petals that is very, very white, I am just kind of like very dry brushing that back in there, and because it's so dry it's working really nicely, but if you had a brand new one it might not work that well. So you might want to dry brush it in with some white gouache. Another thing that really plays up the lighting effects on scenes like this is little white edges where the sunlight is hitting. So I'm using that Posca pen to bring back some of that stuff in on the very edges of leaves and on the shiny parts of some of those lighter leaves and things like that. And here's the finished product, and I do think that it does have a lot of that lighting effect that we wanted, and you can see that these flowers are transparent. I do think I could have played it up even more if the interior of those yellower leaves had been more yellow and not quite as dark as they are, and different areas that might have gotten a little bit too dark, but overall I do think it's a good effect. And there you have it, a nice little symbol of spring. And I'm about to go tiptoe through the tulips, so y'all don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share, all of that fun stuff, because that's how this channel gets to grow. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again in 2 weeks.